Hi, I'm Pierre. I'm the market lead for our Thomson Reuters tax and accounting business for the Asia and emerging market region. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by...
Hi, I'm Shiraz Khan, Head of Tax at Tamimi.
So Shiraz, thank you so much for being with us today. Bahrain and VAT is a very new story. They've been live for less than 2 months as we speak. So from your point of view, from a legal framework point of view, what has been happening so far?
As you mentioned, VAT is only imposed in Bahrain for just over a month. So it's very, very new. So unsurprisingly, there's been no legislative developments. However, like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the tax authority have issued some guidance. So they've published at this stage 3 guides, general guides on VAT. It's expected in the future that they'll publish more guides, particularly in relation to the VAT treatment for specific industry sectors. I think it's also important to mention that the tax authority changed its name. It was previously the National Bureau of Taxation, and now it's referred to as the National Bureau of Revenue. Finally, it's also important to mention the phased introduction of VAT in Bahrain. So larger businesses which had revenue of over 5 million Bahraini dinars had to register from the 1st of January this year. However, businesses with revenue less than that could register on a voluntary basis if they wanted to, subject to them meeting the requirements, or they could postpone VAT registration. For some businesses, they could postpone to the 1st of July. For other businesses, 1st of January to 2020.
Interesting. I guess that kind of phased approach is also something that we've seen elsewhere. Obviously, for instance, Saudi, the smallest business only have to start to get registered for VAT from 2019 onwards, right?
Absolutely. Small businesses, that is businesses with turnover of less than 1 million, were able to postpone VAT registration for 1 year.
Exactly. So, what would you say would be some of the key difference that you've seen in the framework of Bahrain compared to UAE and Saudi so far?
All 3 countries have based their VAT legislation on the same GCC agreement. So the general principles have been drawn from that GCC agreement. So there's many similarities. However, in terms of some of the differences, some of the key differences relate to the policy decisions which were taken by the countries. Okay. So, for example, you had Saudi Arabia on the one hand, which is zero-rated whatever they were required to zero-rate in accordance with the GCC agreement. So there's 5 items which they had to zero-rate, all the countries had to zero-rate, and Saudi Arabia only zero-rated those items. The UAE, on the other hand, zero-rated a few additional items. So in addition to those 5 standard items, they zero-rated, for example, education services and certain essential healthcare, and also the first supply of residential real estate, with subsequent supplies being exempt.
Okay.
However, Bahrain, on the other hand, is on the other side of the extreme, and in addition to what the UAE has done, they've also zero-rated 94 items of food. And also they've exempted the VAT on residential and commercial real estate, subject to certain exceptions.
Right. And what about penalties?
In terms of the penalties, the framework is quite different. So in Bahrain, you have to bear in mind that the penalties can be quite high, and they're typically up to 25% of the amount of tax. And in addition, any violation which normally constitutes non-compliance could also constitute tax evasion in Bahrain. So therefore, taxpayers have to be careful in terms of managing that risk.
Absolutely. So, what would you recommend, based on what we just discussed, Bahrain businesses to do right now?
I think the most important thing is to make sure they've identified the correct VAT treatment and they comply with all the obligations, and they proactively manage this risk by taking advice in this regard. It's important to note that in Bahrain, there are very high penalties if they commit errors. So the penalties for errors could be 25% of the amount of tax. And more importantly, any normal non-compliance violation could also constitute tax evasion. And the penalties for tax evasion are 300% of the amount of tax. And there could also be imprisonment for 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that would hopefully give something to think about to all the companies in Bahrain who are currently going through a VAT implementation. Well, Shiraz, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time.